Revenge with Karen.
The automatic doors of the San Francisco Marriott Marquis slid open, hitting me with a blast of recycled air that smelled faintly of expensive lilies and desperation. I was running on 3 hours of sleep, a red-eye flight from Zurich that had been delayed twice, and a strict diet of stale pretzels. I wasn't wearing my usual armor. No tailored blazer, no heels sharp enough to puncture an ego, no sleek blowout. Just a charcoal hoodie, nondescript black leggings, and a pair of running shoes that had seen better days. My luggage, containing the suit I was supposed to be wearing for the pre-event mixer, was currently enjoying a scenic tour of a carousel in Denver thanks to an airline mix-up. I looked less like the keynote speaker of the Global Innovation Summit and more like someone who had just rolled out of a dorm room during finals week. I adjusted the strap of my laptop bag, only thing of value I had on me. By the way, if you love watching entitled people dig their own graves, hit follow button and upvote. It fuels my soul almost as much as fresh coffee, and trust me, this gets good. Anyway, I walked toward the check-in desk, my mind already rehearsing the opening lines of my speech on algorithmic ethics and the erosion of digital privacy. I was in the zone. I was calculating the pacing, the pauses, moment I would drop the statistics that usually made the C-suite executives in the front row squirm in their Italian leather chairs. Hey, you. Yeah, you. The voice was nasally, loud, and dripped with the kind of unearned confidence that usually comes from being 22 and having a father who golfs with the hiring manager. I stopped and turned. Standing there was a young man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in finance bros. He was wearing a navy blue suit that was a shade too bright, brown shoes that were too pointy, and a name tag that hung crookedly from his lapel. He was checking his watch, a bulky, gold-colored thing that looked heavy enough to anchor a small boat, and tapping his foot impatiently. I looked around, assuming he was shouting at a bellhop or perhaps a friend, but we were the only two people standing in that specific stretch of marble flooring between the entrance and the elevators. Me, asked, my voice raspy from the flight. Yes, you, finally. I've been waiting for 10 minutes, he snapped, rolling his eyes. He gestured frantically at a cluster of silver hard-shell suitcases stacked next to him. Grab my bags, driver. The car is out front, right? Black SUV? I'm already late for the VIP mixer, and if I miss the opening networking hour, my boss is going to kill me. I stared at him. Sheer processing power required to understand what was happening took a moment. He thought I was his Uber driver, or a private car service. He saw a woman in a hoodie, no makeup, standing near the door, and his brain, clearly running on a deprecated operating system, categorized me as service staff. I'm not, I started to say, intending to politely correct him. I was going to say, I'm not your driver, I'm actually the reason you're here. He cut me off with a sharp hand wave, a dismissal so casual it was almost impressive. Save the excuses. Just load the trunk. And be careful with the carry-on, it has my laptop in it. Unlike you, I actually have work to do. Something in my chest clicked. It was a cold, metallic sound. It was the sound of the nice Lena protocol shutting down and the executive Lena defensive systems coming online. I looked at his face. He wasn't even looking at me. He was scrolling through his phone, likely checking crypto prices or texting a frat brother about how much he was going to crush this conference. He picked up the smallest bag, a leather messenger satchel, and literally tossed it at me. It wasn't a handoff, it was a throw. I caught it by reflex, clutching the leather against my chest. The audacity was physical. It had weight. Chop, chop, he muttered, not looking up from his screen. I don't tip for slowness. Lobby seemed to go quiet. A few people near the concierge desk turned their heads. I saw a woman in a business suit pause, her coffee cup halfway to her mouth, eyes widening as she processed the scene. She looked at him, then at me. She seemed to sense the energy shift, the static electricity building in the air. I held the bag. I looked at the monogram on the flap, BTJ. Bradley? Brad? Brent? It didn't matter. He was a variable in an equation I was about to solve. Didn't say a word. I didn't correct him. I didn't throw the bag back. I didn't scream, "Do you know who I am?" The refuge of the insecure. Instead, I let a calm, icy silence settle over me. It's a trick I learned in boardrooms filled with men who interrupt me. Silence is louder than shouting if you hold it long enough. He finally looked up, annoyed that I hadn't moved. What is your problem? Do you not speak English? The car. Go. I looked him dead in the eye. Didn't blink. I channeled every ounce of authority I had earned over 20 years in Silicon Valley every patent I held, every piece of legislation I had helped draft. I let him see the intelligence behind the exhaustion. For a split second, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. His reptilian brain sensed a predator, but his conscious brain was too blinded by bias to interpret the signal. "Fine," I said softly. I turned around, holding his bag. "Finally," he huffed, grabbing the handles of his two large rolling suitcases. "Lead the way." I walked toward the revolving doors, but at the last second, I veered sharp left toward the security access door, the one marked authorized personnel only. I knew the layout of this hotel. I'd keynoted here 3 years ago. "Hey, where are you going? The exit is that way," he shouted. I didn't look back. I swiped my temporary digital pass, which I had downloaded to my phone while waiting for my luggage, against the reader. The light turned green with a cheerful beep. I pushed through the door into the employee corridor, clutching his leather messenger bag. The heavy door swung shut behind me, engaging the magnetic lock with a heavy thud, cutting off his confused shouting. I stood there in the quiet, carpeted hallway used by staff and VIPs. I looked down at his bag. I wasn't stealing it. Oh no, I was simply securing it. I walked down the hallway toward the freight elevator that led to the executive suites. I could hear the faint, muffled sound of him banging on the security door from the other side. "Open up, you have my bag." "Hey," I pulled out my phone and texted the event director, Sarah. "I'm here," came in through the back, had a slight issue with a confused attendee in the lobby. "I'll explain later. Also, I have a hostage." I smiled for the first time that day. Exhaustion evaporated, replaced by the adrenaline of the hunt. He wanted me to handle his baggage. Fine. I was going to handle it. I was going to handle it in front of 3,000 people. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse floor. As the doors closed, I whispered to the empty car. "Buckle up, BTJ." The freight elevator hummed smoothly, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the lobby I just left behind. I leaned back against the polished metal wall, BTJ. Leather bag still clutched in my hand. It smelled of cheap cologne and desperation. Curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't going to snoop through his personal digital life. I have ethics, after all, but the external pockets were fair game. I unbuckled the front flap. A stack of business cards tumbled out. Brad T. Jenkins, visionary, disruptor, growth hacker. I monetize mindsets. Actually laughed out loud. I monetize mindsets. It sounded like something an AI trained exclusively on LinkedIn influence hustle posts would generate. Below the text was a QR code that I assumed led to a portfolio of regurgitated crypto advice. The elevator dinged, opening onto the 40th floor, the VIP staging area. The atmosphere here was rarefied air. The carpet was thicker. The lighting was warm and golden. The sound of the city below was entirely absent. Sarah, the event director, was pacing near the registration table, looking at her tablet with the intensity of a bomb defusal expert. When she saw me, her shoulders instantly dropped 3 inches. "Lena," she exhaled, rushing over. She stopped just short of hugging me, respecting the professional boundary, but the relief in her eyes was palpable. "Thank God. Airline tracker said your bags were in Denver, and I was about to send a stylist to the nearest Nordstrom to buy out the store for you." "Denver is lovely this time of year," I said dryly, shifting the strange man's bag to my other shoulder. "But I think I'll manage. I have a backup outfit in my carry-on, assuming that wasn't lost too." Sarah frowned, looking at the messenger bag. "Is that yours? It doesn't look like your style." "This?" I patted Brad's bag. "This is collateral." Ran into a bit of a situation downstairs. Some young man mistook me for driver and insisted I take his bag, so I did. Sarah's eyes went wide. "You're joking, I wish." "He threw it at me, Sarah. Literally threw it." Sarah's face hardened. She was a veteran of these events. She had seen every type of ego the tech world could produce. "Point him out to me. I'll have his badge revoked before he gets through security." "No," I said quickly, raising a hand. "Absolutely not. Do not touch him. Let him in. Let him sit anywhere he wants." "Lena," she warned, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning a teachable moment," I said. "Just keep this bag here at the desk for me. If anyone comes looking for a stolen bag belonging to a Brad, tell them it was turned in by security and is being held for verification. Make him sweat." I handed the bag over to her assistant, who handled it like it was radioactive. I said, straightening my hoodie, "I need a shower and 10 minutes of silence before I have to be the Lena." "Right this way," Sarah said, guiding me down the hall. As we walked, we passed the VIP lounge. Through the glass doors, I could see the titans of the industry. There was the CEO of the largest chip manufacturer in the world, sipping espresso. There was the founder of that new quantum computing startup, frantically typing on a tablet. As I walked past, heads turned. Despite my hoodie, despite the lack of makeup, they knew. Lena, the chip CEO, waved, standing up. I read your white paper on neural drifting last week. Brilliant stuff. We need to talk about the regulation chapter. I smiled, waving back. Catch me after the keynote, David. I'm currently undercover. He laughed, confused but charmed. This was the dichotomy of my life. To the people who actually built things, I was a peer, a mentor, an authority. The Brads of the world, who saw only surface-level markers of status, suits, watches, loud voices, I was invisible. Or worse, I was servitude. I entered the private green room assigned to me. It was nicer than my apartment. A fruit basket the size of a shrub sat on the table. Beside it, a small, heavy envelope made of cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. I opened it. My credentials. Lena K. Keynote speaker access. All areas/universal. I clipped the heavy laminate badge to my hoodie. It felt like putting on a shield. Meanwhile, 40 floors below, I knew exactly what was happening. Brad was likely screaming at the front desk. He was probably berating a minimum wage employee about the incompetence of the driver. He was digging his hole deeper, shovel by shovel. I took a shower in the private in suit, washing off the airplane grime. I changed into the backup outfit I'd packed in my backpack, a simple, severe black turtleneck and wide-leg trousers. Minimalist, Steve Jobs but with better fabric. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I looked in the mirror. The tired traveler was gone. The shark had arrived. I checked the event app on my phone to see the schedule. I wanted to see where Brad fit into this ecosystem. I searched for Brad Jenkins. There he was. Panel: Growth Hacking the Future, Disrupting Traditional Hierarchies. Time: 2:00 p.m. Location: Hall B, the small hall, Disrupting Hierarchies. The irony was so rich it could cause gout. I texted Sarah again. Make sure I have a seat for the 2:00 p.m. panel in Hall B, in the back. Unobtrusive. The reply came instantly. Done. But you're on main stage at 4:00. You sure you want to waste time on the undercard? I need to do some market research, I typed back, on the current state of incompetence. I sat down in the leather chair, staring at the city skyline. I had 2 hours before I had to be anywhere. 2 hours to let Brad simmer in the juices of his own panic. 2 hours to prepare the verbal scalpel I was going to use to dissect him. I closed my eyes and breathed. The game had just begun. I didn't stay in the green room. I'm restless before a speech. Need to feel the pulse of the room, hear the hum of the crowd. So, I took my credentials, tucked discreetly inside my blazer pocket so the keynote ribbon wasn't immediately visible, and headed up to the mezzanine level. The mezzanine was a semi-private balcony overlooking the main convention floor. It was technically open to anyone with a premium pass or higher, but it was mostly populated by serious investors looking to escape the noise of the startup booths below. Ordered a sparkling water with lime and leaned against the glass railing, watching the ants swarm below. The convention floor was a kaleidoscope of neon banners, massive LED screens, and thousands of people desperate to be noticed. Excuse me, is this seat taken? I stiffened. I knew that voice. The nasal whine was unmistakable. I turned slowly. Brad was there. He looked frazzled. His tie was slightly askew and he was sweating. He was clutching a new bag, cheap canvas tote he must have picked up from a vendor booth, and he looked like he'd been through a war. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes narrowed. He clearly recognized me as the driver, but the context confused him. I was standing in the VIP mezzanine, drinking a $12 water, wearing sleek black clothes, but prejudice is a powerful drug. Instead of recalibrating, his brain scrambled to find a logic that fit his worldview. You, he said, pointing a finger. What are you doing here? Did you get fired? Is that why you ran off? I took a slow sip of my water. Hello, Brad, enjoying the conference. He blinked, thrown off by my use of his name. Then he scoffed. Don't act like you know me. I had to report you to the hotel management. They're looking for you. You stole my property. I secured an unattended bag left with unauthorized personnel. I corrected him calmly. I believe it's at the registration desk. Lost and found. He flushed a deep, blotchy red. You put my bag in lost and found. Do you know how embarrassing that was? I had to describe my laptop stickers to a woman named Brenda for 20 minutes. Sounds tedious, I said. Maybe next time, carry your own bags. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. Listen, lady. I don't know how you snuck up here, probably cleaning the tables or something, but you need to watch your tone. I'm a speaker at this event. He puffed out his chest, tapping his badge. It was a standard speaker badge, the kind given to hundreds of panelists. That's impressive, I said, my voice flat. Yeah, it is, he sneered. I'm on the growth hacking panel. I'm shaping the industry. What are you doing, refilling the water coolers? Just then, a small group approached us. It was the delegation from the Department of Defense's AI Research Unit. General Morris, man I've worked with on several classified ethics boards, was leading them. He was a man who commanded rooms simply by walking into them. Lena, General Morris boomed, ignoring Brad completely. He extended a hand. I was hoping we'd run into you before the keynote. We have some questions about that paper you published on autonomous decision variances. The Pentagon is concerned. I shook his hand firmly. General, good to see you. Variances are only a risk if the oversight parameters are ignored, which, knowing your contractors, is a valid concern. The general laughed, a deep, gravelly sound. That's why we need you, Lena, always the sharpest knife in the drawer. Brad was standing there, his mouth slightly open. He looked from the general in full uniform to me and back to the general. I'm sorry, Brad interrupted, desperate to regain control of the narrative. General, you know this, woman. General Morris turned to look at Brad. His expression shifted from warm respect to the kind of look one gives a cockroach on a restaurant floor. This woman, the general repeated, his voice dropping an octave. This is Dr. Lena Korhonen. She's the reason half the systems in this building are secure. Who are you? Brad paled. I'm Brad. I'm a speaker. Growth hacking. The general turned back to me, dismissing Brad entirely. Anyway, Lena, are you free for dinner later? Love to pick your brain. I'll check my schedule, General, I said, keeping my eyes on Brad. Brad's brain was misfiring. I could see it. He couldn't reconcile Uber driver with Pentagon consultant, so he chose denial. She's probably his assistant, Brad muttered under his breath, barely audible as he backed away. Yeah, consultant. Right. Probably just takes notes. He turned and hurried away toward the bar, clearly needing a drink to wash down the cognitive dissonance. I watched him go. Friend of yours? The general asked, raising an eyebrow. A case study, I replied. I'm collecting data on the density of the human ego. Sounds dangerous, the general chuckled. Oh, it is, I said, swirling the ice in my glass. For him? I checked my watch. 1:45 p.m. Excuse me, General. I have a panel to attend. Here there's some cutting-edge thought leadership on growth hacking that I simply cannot miss. I walked toward the elevators. The trap was set. Now, I just had to watch him walk into it. Hall B was a windowless cavern that smelled of stale coffee and aggressive air conditioning. It was set up for about 200 people, but only about 40 chairs were occupied. Most of the audience seemed to be other interns, a few confused stragglers, people charging their phones near the wall outlets. I slipped into the very last row, pulling my blazer tight around me. I kept my head down, ostensibly checking my phone, but my ears were tuned to the stage. Brad was sitting on a high stool in the center of the stage, flanked by two other young men who looked like clones of him, just with different vest colors. The moderator, a tired-looking woman from a tech blog, asked a question about sustainable growth. Brad grabbed the microphone as if it were a baton in a relay race he was winning. Great question, he boomed, his voice echoing too loudly in the half-empty room. But I think sustainable is a trap. It's a legacy mindset. We don't want sustainable. We want explosive. We want to break things. If you're not breaking things, you're not building. He looked around the room, expecting applause. He got a cough. At my startup, he continued, we don't have employees. We have ninjas. Have meetings, we have collisions. It's about flattening the hierarchy. The old guard, the dinosaurs, they're too slow. They're obsessed with ethics and compliance. We're obsessed with shipping. I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw, obsessed with ethics. He said it like it was a slur. Let me give you an example, Brad went on, leaning forward, manspreading on the stool. I had an interaction today. A classic example of the service mindset vs. the owner mindset. I had to deal with let's call her a logistics provider. She was slow, she was confused, she didn't understand urgency. That's the problem with the workforce today. No hustle. If you're not running, you're dead. He was talking about me. He was using his abuse of me as a parable for his business acumen. A young woman sitting 2 seats away from me leaned over to her friend. Is he serious? Logistics provider? He sounds like a sociopath. Her friend whispered back. Sounds like every guy who's ever tried to explain Bitcoin to me at a bar. I smiled behind my hand. The audience wasn't buying it. Brad, however, was oblivious. He was on a roll. You have to dominate your space. You have to assert dominance immediately, whether it's with a vendor, a client, or anyone. Alpha energy isn't toxic, it's efficient. I took out my notepad, an actual paper notepad, and wrote down, Alpha energy isn't toxic, it's efficient. Brad Jenkins, 2:15 p.m. I was going to use that. Oh, I was definitely going to use that. The moderator tried to pivot to the other panelists, but Brad kept interrupting. He interrupted the woman on his left. He interrupted the moderator. He was a black hole of attention, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Actually, let me jump in there, Brad said, cutting off a thoughtful point about user privacy. Privacy is dead. Get over it. Data is the new oil. You don't ask the oil for permission to drill it. You just drill. A collective groan rippled through the room. The woman next to me shifted. She glanced at me, then did a double take. She looked at my profile, then down at the phone in her lap. I saw her screen. She had the conference website open. My face was on the banner. She looked back at me, her eyes widening to the size of saucers. Wait, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Are you? I turned to her and put a single finger to my lips. SHHH. She gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. She nudged her friend violently. It's her, she hissed. It's Lena Korhonen. She's sitting right there. The friend looked. No way, why would she be at this panel? She's watching him, the first woman whispered. Oh my God, look at her face. He's dead. He's so dead. The whisper spread. It moved like a wave through the back rows. Lena Korhonen is here. She's in the back. She's watching Brad. Heads started to turn. People stopped looking at the stage and started looking at me. Phones were raised, cameras pointed surreptitiously in my direction. Brad, up on stage, noticed the shift in attention. He thought they were finally captivated by his brilliance. He stood up and walked to the edge of the stage. See, you're feeling it, he said, spreading his arms. That's the energy I'm talking about, disruption. He had no idea. He was preening for an audience that was currently watching the executioner sharpen her axe. I stood up quietly. I had enough material. The alpha energy quote was the nail in the coffin. I nodded to the two women next to me. They looked at me with a mix of awe and terror. Enjoy the rest of the show, I whispered. I walked out of the hall. The air in the corridor felt cleaner. I checked the time. 3:00 p.m., 1 hour until showtime. Brad's panel ended in 10 minutes. Would be heading to the main hall soon, expecting to watch the keynote. He probably thought he could network his way into the VIP section. I headed back to the green room to put on my microphone. It was time to switch from observation to action. The main hall was a beast. It seated 3,000 people, and it was standing room only. The lights were dimmed to a deep, cinematic blue, pulsing gently to the beat of low-frequency ambient bass. Felt less like a conference, and more like a massive concert for people who code in Python. I stood in the wings, stage left. The stage manager, a guy named Mike with a headset and a clipboard, was counting down. 2 minutes, Lena. You look great. Killer suit. Thanks, Mike. I peeked through the curtain. The front row was reserved for Diamond tier attendees and speakers, and there he was. Brad had somehow weaseled his way into a seat in the second row, right near the center aisle. He was beaming. He was chatting up the person next to him, who looked like a senior engineer from Google, probably trying to pitch his mindset monetization strategy. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had gotten away with it. He had his phone out, ready to record the keynote, likely to post it later with a caption about how inspired he was. The announcer's voice boomed through the massive speaker array, shaking the floorboards. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker. She is a Turing Award nominee, the architect of the sentience protocols, and the CEO of Ethelgard Systems. Please welcome Dr. Lena Korhonen. The applause was thunderous. It washed over me like a physical wave. I took a deep breath. I walked out. The lights hit me, blind white spotlights that made it impossible to see the back rows, but illuminated the front rows with terrifying clarity. I walked to the center of the stage. I didn't smile. I didn't do the humble wave. I stood there, center stage, hands clasped behind my back, radiating absolute stillness. The applause began to die down, fading into an expectant hush. I looked down. I found him immediately. Brad was clapping, a polite, networking smile on his face. Then he really looked at me. I saw the moment the neurons connected. I saw the signal travel from his optic nerve to his visual cortex, access his memory of the driver in the lobby, cross-reference it with the woman on stage, and trigger a catastrophic system failure. His hands stopped moving mid-clap. His mouth fell open, not in a figure of speech, but literally. His jaw unhinged. He squinted, as if hoping it was a trick of the light, as if hoping I was a twin sister. I locked eyes with him. I tilted my head slightly, just a fraction of an inch, the same way I had looked at him in the lobby when he threw the bag. Recognition slammed into him like a freight train. He turned to the guy next to him, the Google engineer, and mouthed something. It looked like, "That's her." The engineer looked at Brad, then up at me, then back at Brad. The engineer pulled away slightly, sensing the radioactive panic radiating off the intern. A murmur started in the front rows. The people who had been at the panel, ones who had seen me sitting in the back, were whispering, "That's her." She was at his panel. She heard everything. Oh my God, look at his face. The whispers grew louder. It wasn't the usual buzz of excitement. It was the delicious, terrifying sound of social execution. Brad started to sink in his chair. He physically tried to make himself smaller. He pulled his jacket collar up. He looked at the exit sign, which was 100 yards away through a dense crowd. He was trapped. I stepped up to the microphone. The silence in the room was absolute, 3,000 people holding their breath. I let the silence hang for 5 full seconds, 10 seconds. It became uncomfortable. It became heavy. I kept my eyes on Brad. I saw a bead of sweat roll down his temple, catching the stage light. "Perception," I said. My voice was crisp, amplified to godlike proportions by the sound system. "Perception is a funny thing. Build our world based on pattern recognition. We see a suit, we think success. We see a hoodie, we think slacker. We see a woman standing in a lobby, and we think—" I paused. I let the word hang there. "Help." Brad flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Today, I want to talk about the errors in our algorithms," I continued, walking slowly to the edge of the stage, looming over the second row. "Not just in our code, but in our culture." I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Because sometimes the data is right in front of you, but your bias creates a blind spot that can cost you everything. The audience was hooked. They didn't know the full story yet, but they knew they were watching Bloodsport. I took the clicker from the podium. "Let's begin. Before we dive into the new heuristic models for neural networks," I said, pacing the stage, "I want to share a piece of field data I collected this morning." Right here, the Marriott lobby. I clicked the remote. The massive screen behind me turned black, and then a single word appeared in stark white text: assumptions. We teach our AI models to categorize. Is this a cat or a dog? Is this a tumor or a shadow? Is this a threat or a friend? But what happens when the training data is corrupted by arrogance? I stopped directly in front of Brad's section. I wasn't looking at him anymore. That would be too obvious. I was looking just above his head, but everyone in his blast radius felt the heat. I arrived today tired. I was wearing leggings. I was standing near the door, and a young man, let's call him the disruptor. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. The disruptor approached me. He didn't see a keynote speaker. He didn't see a human being. He saw a function. He saw a mechanism to move his luggage from point A to point B. I clicked the remote again. Slide appeared showing a stock photo of a generic, angry businessman yelling at a phone. "He threw his bag at me," I said. The audience gasped. A collective, sharp intake of breath. Literally threw it, and he commanded me to drive him. When I hesitated, he didn't question his assumption. He doubled down. He questioned my competence. He questioned my language skills. "Boo," someone shouted from the back. Now, I continued, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Could have corrected him. I could have said, "Sir, I am Dr. Lena Korhonen, and I have more patents than you have years on this earth." Cheers erupted. A few people stood up, but I didn't, because I wanted to see how far the error would propagate. I wanted to see the runtime of his ignorance, so I took his bag. I clicked the remote. The screen changed to a photo I had taken in the elevator, a close-up of the leather bag with the monogram BTJ. Brad let out a small, strangled sound. He was holding his head in his hands. "I took the bag to a secure location," I said. And then, being a diligent researcher, I decided to observe the disruptor in his natural habitat. I went to a panel this afternoon, a panel on growth hacking. I pulled my small paper notepad out of my pocket. I took notes, I said. There was a fascinating hypothesis presented. Quote, "Alpha energy isn't toxic, it's efficient." The room exploded. Laughter, groans, jeers. It was deafening. "Efficiency," I mused, putting the notebook away. Is it efficient to alienate the person who controls the stage you are hoping to climb onto? Is it efficient to treat people like furniture until you realize they have a title you respect? I walked back to the podium and gripped the sides. "This industry," I said, my voice turning hard, is full of brilliant minds, but it is also rotting with this specific kind of rot. Idea that you are the main character and everyone else is an NPC. We are building AI that will reshape humanity. If the people building it cannot distinguish between a person and a servant, we are doomed. I looked down at Brad. He was staring at his knees, shaking. He looked like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. So, to the disruptor, I said, raising a hand, whoever you are, wherever you are sitting. I saw people around him turning. They knew. Radius of realization was collapsing in on him. Fingers were pointing. Thank you for the data, I said coldly. You have provided a perfect dataset for what we need to delete from our source code. I clicked the remote. The screen changed to my actual presentation title, Ethics as an Operating System. Now, I said, businesslike, let's talk about the future. I launched into my speech. For 45 minutes, I held them in the palm of my hand. The undercurrent was there. Every time I used the word blind spot or bias, 3,000 heads turned slightly toward the second row. Brad sat there the whole time. He couldn't leave. Leaving would be admitting guilt. He had to sit there and take it. He had to endure the longest 45 minutes of his life, and I enjoyed every second of it. The applause at the end of the speech was a standing ovation that lasted for 3 full minutes. I drank it in, not out of vanity, because I knew it was the sound of a paradigm shifting. I had given them red meat, and they were feasting. I sat on the tall stool for the cue and a segment. The house lights came up slightly. Microphones were passed around the audience. The first few questions were technical, nuances of the GDPR, the future of quantum encryption. I answered them with ease. Then, a young woman in the balcony stood up. She was wearing a Girls Who Code t-shirt. Dr. Korhonen, she said, voice nervous but clear. You talk about changing the culture. But how do we actually do that when people like the disruptor are the ones getting funded? When they're the ones dominating the conversation, how do we stop them? The room went silent. It was the question everyone wanted to ask. I looked at her. We stop tolerating it, I said. We stop thinking that arrogance is a proxy for competence. And we stop letting them in the room. I looked down at the second row. Brad was looking up at me now. He looked like a cornered animal. There was a mix of fear and a strange, desperate defiance in his eyes. He realized, perhaps, that he had nothing left to lose. He stood up. He didn't have a microphone, but he had that projecting, frat house voice. This is a misunderstanding, he shouted, his voice cracking. You're making me look like a villain for a simple mistake. I didn't know who you were, the crowd gasped. He had outed himself. And that, I said into my microphone, my voice drowning him out effortlessly, is exactly the problem. You treat people with respect only when you know who they are. That isn't respect, that's transaction. I'm a speaker here. Brad yelled, stepping into the aisle. I have a right to be here. You stole my bag, security, I said. I didn't shout. I spoke it calmly, like I was ordering a latte. 2 large men in black suits, who had been hovering near the side of the stage, moved instantly. They were professional, swift, and looked very tired of people like Brad. I'm a VIP, Brad sputtered as the first guard reached him. Get your hands off me. Do you know who my father is? I leaned into the mic. And for those who assume roles based on appearances, I looked directly at the camera streaming to the giant screen. Security, please escort that tourist out. Tourist, Brad screamed as the guards took him by the elbows. I'm a founder. You're a distraction, I said. Goodbye, Brad. The guards lifted him, not literally off the ground, but with enough force that his feet were moving faster than he intended. They marched him up the center aisle. The audience didn't just watch. They started to clap. It started as a slow clap from the back, maybe from the women I had sat next to at his panel. Then it grew. It became a rhythmic, thunderous applause. Farewell cadence. Brad twisted in the guard's grip, looking back at the stage, his face a mask of red fury. He was shouting something, but the applause swallowed his voice. He was deleted. He was muted. I watched him disappear through the double doors at the back of the hall. Next question, I said calmly. The room erupted in laughter and cheers. The tension broke. The air felt lighter. We finished the Q&A, but the energy had shifted. It wasn't just a tech conference anymore. It was a rally. As I walked off stage, Sarah met me in the wings. She was grinning so hard I thought her face might crack. Please escort that tourist out, she quoted. Lena, that is going on a t-shirt. I'm printing them right now. Make sure I get a percentage, I said, unpinning my mic. I have a feeling his bag is still at the front desk. It is, Sarah said. He can pick it up on his way to the airport. I revoked his credentials while you were speaking. I nodded. Good. Now, me a drink? A real one. No more sparkling water. Tequila? The whole bottle. By the time I made it back to my hotel suite an hour later, the internet had done what the internet does best. It had weaponized the footage. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the sofa, pulling out my phone. My notifications were a solid blur of scrolling text. Twitter or X, whatever was melting down. The hashtag #tourist_in_tech was trending #1 globally. #Lena said it was #3. Someone had clipped the video of my perception speech and spliced it with the footage of Brad being escorted out. It had 4 million views in 2 hours. The memes were instant and brutal. Image, a cat knocking a glass off a table. Caption, Alpha Energy. Image, Brad's face zoomed in when he realized it was me. Caption, when the NPC is actually the final boss. Image, me drinking water. Caption, sipping on male tears. I scrolled through the comments. I was there. The sound of his soul leaving his body was audible. This needs to be shown in every HR orientation forever. Grab my bags, driver, RIP to this man's career. And his career was, indeed, rapidly decomposing. LinkedIn, usually a bastion of toxic positivity, had turned on him. I saw a post from the venture capital firm that backed his startup. At Apex Ventures, we value humility and respect. In light of recent events, we are reviewing our partnership with. Translation, he's cooked. Then came the emails. My inbox was flooded, not just fan mail, but serious inquiries. CNN wants an interview. The New York Times wants an op-ed. TED wants me to do a dedicated talk on the architecture of arrogance. I ignored them all. Responding would make it a debate. Silence made it a verdict. My phone buzzed with a call. It was General Morris. He barked. Just saw the clip. Tourist. Ruthless. I love it. He annoyed me, General. He annoyed the world, apparently. Listen, that display of command, it got some people thinking. The Pentagon wants you to lead the new oversight committee. The one we talked about. They want someone who isn't afraid to throw the baggage out of the room. Literally, I smiled at the ceiling. Send over the paperwork. I opened Instagram. A video popped up on my Explore page. It was a TikTok from a barista at the hotel Starbucks. You guys won't believe this. The tourist guy just came in here crying, like actual tears. He's on the phone with his mom screaming that his life is over. He tried to pay with a company card and it was already declined. I gave him a free water. He didn't say thank you. I laughed. A deep, belly laugh that released the tension of the last 12 hours. He hadn't learned. Even at rock bottom, he didn't say thank you. I walked to the window, looking out over San Francisco. The city lights were twinkling. Somewhere out there, Brad was dragging his suitcases himself this time, trying to find a ride to SFO. I poured myself a glass of the tequila Sarah had sent up. The viral fame would fade. The memes would be replaced by the next scandal next week. But the message had landed. I had drawn a line in the sand, and for once, the person on the wrong side of it actually paid the price. Raised my glass to the reflection in the window. Safe travels, tourist. The summit lasted 3 days, but the atmosphere had permanently changed. The air was sharper. The panels were more diverse. The bros were noticeably quieter, checking their tones, holding doors open, terrified of becoming the next meme. On the final day, I was asked to return to the main stage for the closing remarks. I walked out, not in a suit, but in my own clothes, a sharp leather jacket and jeans. I was done performing. 3 days ago, I began, the room instantly quieting. We had a moment of viral entertainment. We laughed at our mistake. We enjoyed the schadenfreude. I paced the stage. But firing one intern doesn't fix the system that created him. Brad wasn't an anomaly. He was a product. He was the output of an algorithm that rewards confidence over competence and volume over value. I signaled to the screen. I don't want to just clear the room of tourists. I want to fill it with residents. The screen flashed a new logo, the Echelon Project. This morning, I liquefied my speaking fee for this event. I matched it with a personal donation of $2 million. And 5 of the VC firms who were embarrassed by their association with Mr. Jenkins have agreed to match that sum as penance. A ripple of excited whispers went through the crowd. Echelon Project is a full-ride scholarship and incubator fund, but not for the people with the loudest voices. It is for the people in the back of the room, the people who are mistaken for service staff, the people who carry the bags. I pointed to the second row, to the seat where Brad had sat. It was empty, a void where arrogance used to be. I have reserved that seat, I said. Next year, it won't be empty. It will be occupied by the first recipient of this grant, a young woman named Amani, who is currently working night shifts to pay for her coding boot camp. I met her in the lobby yesterday. She held the door for me. I smiled. She didn't know who I was. She just did it because she's a decent human being. That is the qualification. The applause started, but I held up a hand. One last thing. To anyone watching this who sees themselves in the disruptor, take a breath. Listen more than you speak. And carry your own damn bags. Drop the mic. Okay, I placed it gently on the podium because those things are expensive, but spiritually I dropped it. I walked off stage to a standing ovation that felt different than the first one. The first one was for a celebrity. This one was for a leader. As I exited the venue, heading toward the waiting black car, my actual driver, who I tipped heavily, I checked my phone one last time. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, I really am. Brad. I looked at it for a moment. I considered replying. I considered giving him a piece of advice. Then I pressed block number. I tossed my phone into my bag which I carried myself, and got into the car. Where to, Dr. Korhonen? The driver asked. The airport, I said. And then, the future. The car pulled away, leaving the hotel, the summit, and the ghost of Brad Jenkins in the rearview mirror. We were all healed.